Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this live CPA Boot Camp sneak peek for UWorld. Boot camps are an exciting feature that came out earlier this year as part of our Elite Unlimited and Elite Unlimited Plus course, and we're going to give you a little overview, brief sneak peek as to what that's all about. So how we're going to go through today's presentation. We're going to start with a quick overview of who is UWorld. We're going to go through the 3 different CPA bootcamp types, FAR, Reg, and ODD. We're going to talk a little bit about getting exam day ready with the UWorld CPA course, and then we'll have some minutes at the end for questions. Now, before I get started, I want to introduce you to who are your bootcamp instructors. These are live sessions taught by the wonderful faces you see here. Peter Olinto is our FAR bootcamp instructor. Unfortunately, Pete is unable to join us here today, but we do have Dr. Megan Burke joining us today, and she will be covering the FAR section. For Reg, we have Dr. Greg Carnes, who is not with us today, but we also have Suzanne Youngbird, who is here today, and she'll be covering the Reg portion. And then finally, we have Dr. Jeannie Yamamara, who will be covering the ODD section of the boot camps today. So thank you all for joining us today. This is an elite group of instructors, the best of the best that you're going to be hearing from and that you would get to see and interact with live in our bootcamp sessions. Now, quick overview, who is UWorld? UWorld is a leader in education technology. We've helped over 2 million pass high stakes exams. We do have a strong focus on accounting and finance. However, you'll see in the little circle here on the side, medical, nursing, legal, grad, pharmacy, all types of high stakes exams covering all types of verticals that we prepare the best of the best for the most difficult exams out there. Now, focusing on accounting and finance, some of you may have heard of Roger CPA Review several years ago. This was acquired by UWorld. We then acquired Wiley Efficient Learning and also joined our team, one of the top instructors for CPA, Peter Olinto, who I mentioned earlier. With this, we have a broad range of coverage for the top exams in an accounting and finance, CPA, CMA, CIA, CFA, CMT. We cover it all. We make sure that you are prepared for these high stakes accounting and finance exams. Now, focusing on CPA, as many of you know, the 2024 CPA exam came out last year. It was a major change. We launched an all-new course that helps prepare people for this exam based on the AI CPA blueprints. We make sure that everything that we do is mapped to those AI CPA blueprints so that we ensure that you are passing the content that is specifically laid out by those who write the exam from the AI CPA. With that, we have an expert team of educators and practicing CPAs, some of who you're meeting today. And ultimately, we want to know it works, right? So we have a proven pass rate, 94% pass rate for our program and our methodology. And then today's focus is on live CPA boot camp. So what are these? These are live interactive online classes that are exclusive within our Elite Unlimited and our Elite Unlimited Plus course. And they are taught by these expert instructors. And this is your opportunity to refresh your knowledge on the most frequently tested content areas. That's where we focus, and that's what we'll talk about a little bit more today. We give you strategies for passing the most difficult questions, multiple choice questions, task-based simulations, and provide test-taking skills for you on the exam. So this is your opportunity to ask questions and go straight to the source of our program and get the best guidance that you can receive to ensure you will pass the exam. Now, The way that this is laid out, for those of you that are in the Elite Unlimited and Elite Unlimited Plus course, you'll see here where it's pointing to the word events. There you will access our recent schedule, and there you will also sign up to join one of these live classes. So this is only in those courses. And here is our most recent schedule. So we have classes starting as early as September 23rd and going through the end of October. And with these, you'll see we are focusing specifically on the core sections of the CPA exam. These are 2-hour sessions. They're conveniently scheduled on weeknights, and they are fully available. That link right there at the bottom of the screen is your full schedule that's available. So you can take a look at that there. And then again, you can see that in your course. And without further ado, I'm going to bring to the stage our first presenter, Suzanne Youngberg, on the reg section.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm Suzanne Youngberg. I'm a faculty member at Northern Illinois University. I'm going to be working with Dr. Greg Carnes. He is a faculty member at the University of North Alabama. Unfortunately, he can't be with us today, but he will be joining us for the 2 boot camps that we cover with reg. So I'm going to lead you in what I consider to be the most exciting and best section of the CPA exam, which is regulation. That is covering our ethics and professional responsibilities, business law, and then of course all the sections and chapters regarding taxation. So we have a lot of material that we'll be covering in our boot camp together. So, you know, successful tax professionals were key strategic partners, right, with our business owners. And so there are certain strategies and skills that we need to have regarding, you know, problem solving or analytical or just even dealing with ambiguity. And so a lot of the problems that we'll be going through within the chapters are kind of focusing on those particular areas. So the boot camp that's coming up, boot camp 1 for reg, is going to be a big overview. It's an overview of 12 tax chapters. And so it's a lot of material. We'll be going through it quickly, but it's going to give you a good idea of what we think are highly testable areas within those 12 tax chapters. Now, boot camp 2, we're going to be focusing on ethics, professional responsibilities, and federal tax procedures. So we're taking a little bit different approach because that will be considered a deep dive. Our goal is to maximize, you know, the 4 hours that we have together so that you can maximize your reg score. We'll also be providing you those question ID numbers so that you have easy reference later on if you want to go back and look at some questions that we discussed in the boot camp. All right, so our approach, all right, so we're reviewing those 12 chapters in one. Those are highly tested areas. We're going to alternate. So Greg and I will alternate chapters, give you a little variation of who's presenting the material. And the other person, while one person is speaking, the other person is going to be in the chat box, right? And they'll be during that live discussion and giving you immediate feedback on any questions that you might have regarding the material that's being covered that night or anything else that you have. Now, again, we're covering a wide variety of topics. You know, we're going to look at basis of assets, cost recovery, loss limitations, gross income, and a lot of other topics that are being covered. We'll look at some multiple choice questions to look at those critical thinking, analytical problem solving skills that you have. And then also throughout our presentation, both of us will be providing some test taking tips throughout our presentation to help you along. So we start with our boot camp 2. We'll be looking at our chapters 1 and 2 and chapters 3 and 4. Again, Greg and I will be alternating those chapters. But please keep in mind that boot camp 2 is different material than boot camp 1. So you need to make sure that you attend on both nights so that you get full coverage of all the material that would be that we're looking at for reg. So again, we'll be doing a deeper dive into chapters 1 through 4. We're also going to make sure that you get a chance to look at a task-based simulation and how to approach solving that TBS, because you know, 50% of your exam score is on task-based simulation. So we want to make sure that you see it in a variety of formats and that you learn how to solve those TBSs efficiently. So let's go ahead and give you a little bit of a sample of what you might see. I'm going to make this brief because I need to give some time for our other speakers to speak. But this is looking at Reg 11, or Chapter 11, which is cost recovery. And so you see a slide here that's talking about just in general how we calculate that total cost recovery deduction. You got Section 179, you have your bonus depreciation, and you've got regular depreciation. So what are some of the things that you're going to hear during the boot camp? Well, we're going to be discussing the makers and the makers tables. We'll be discussing what's personalty, what's realty. We'll be looking at our conventions, which you can see here on the screen. You know, what's mid-year, what's mid-quarter, what's mid-month, and what do they apply to? What if you sell an asset during the year? How do you compute the depreciation expense when you sell an asset? We'll be focusing on some of the basic rules, looking at Section 179 and bonus depreciation, as well as looking at the ordering of how we would do that calculation. So we have lots of multiple choice questions, and then also some other things, as well as those test taking tips in order for you to be successful. So let's go ahead and take a look at a multiple choice question. All right, this first question, it says, Quanti Company, a calendar year taxpayer, purchased small tools for $5,000 on December 21st of year 4. No other tangible personal property was purchased in year 4. Assume Quanti does not expense the tools using Section 179 or bonus depreciation. Under the maker's general depreciation system, how many months of depreciation can Quanti Company claim for year 4? All right, so we're looking at a multiple choice question, which in the narrative, they give you some really important information that I want to highlight. And so when Greg and I are going through the multiple choice questions, we'll be doing this with you. So the first thing that I notice is that they purchase small tools. So I'm asking myself, what type of asset is that? All right, well, I've got tangible personalty. It was purchased and placed into service in December of year 4, and no other assets were purchased during the year. So now that's cluing me in, well, what type of convention would I use for this asset? Well, greater than 40% of the assets were purchased and placed into service in the 4th quarter because it was December. So therefore, all right, we're going to have to use that mid-quarter convention. It did mention that there's no Section 179, there's no bonus. So these are all things that I'm thinking of, and I'm just reading the narrative. Now, the question is asking, how many months of depreciation can Quanti Company claim for year 4? Next slide, please. We're going to see that it's going to end up being 1.5 months. Now, when you think of mid-quarter convention, you got a quarter, right? A quarter is 3 months. If it's mid-quarter, that's 1.5 months. And so that's how we got our correct answer. Now, I wanted to just briefly show you the UWorld way of showing a solution. We pride ourselves in the detail that's being provided in the solution, the explanation, to make sure that you understand the material. Almost all of the solutions, the explanation, start off with a visual. And so you can see that there's a table here that's showing the type of depreciable property and the months allowed. You're also going to see that there's a general explanation of makers and what that is considering. And then finally, they start talking about the solution. And you can see here it talks about the mid-quarter convention and how I just mentioned if you have more than 40% of the assets placed into service in that 4th quarter, that you use the mid-quarter convention. It ends with the solution regarding things to remember. And I really like this because if I'm a student and I'm preparing note cards, I'm looking at that things to remember section and making a note card out of that so that I remember what those key concepts were from this particular problem. One last thing before we move on, that reference section, you see where it's blue? All right, if you were to click on that reference section, it's going to take you to the direct area of where this material was covered in the chapter. So let's say you got it wrong and you're like, I'm still not quite sure. I would like more information on this. You'd click on that reference section and that's going to take you again directly to that chapter summary and area in which we were discussing the mid-quarter convention and cost recovery in general. So it discusses where the representative task came from as well. We talked about how we want to make sure that that your learning is tied to the AI CPA blueprints, and this is telling you exactly where it came from. So that's just a little bit of a summary of the material that you're going to be covering in Reg. There's a lot more to come. Please join us for Boot Camp 1 and Boot Camp 2. Thank you.
All right, everybody, I'm Jean Yamamura, here to give you a sneak peek at the AUD Boot Camp. Next slide. So in order to pass AUD, you need to understand auditing theory and then be able to apply that theory to various types of situations. For example, you might be asked to identify the risk of material misstatement that is present in a company that is growing rapidly, much faster than its peers. This kind of question doesn't have an easy answer that can be memorized. Instead, you need to understand what the question is really asking and then be able to figure out how to get the answer from the information provided. As Suzanne noted, you're also going to need good test-taking skills. These are skills you might not have used for some time, so they will require some brushing up. You're also going to need to be able to concentrate and focus for 4 hours and to apply your knowledge and skills to multiple choice questions and TBSs. Next slide, please. So the AUD Boot Camp will be laid out, so we'll cover about half of the audit process in the first session, and then the second half of the audit process in the second session. We're going to work through the steps in the audit process to review key testing areas. You know, for example, audit planning or internal controls or risk of material misstatement. Our goal for the workshop is to maximize your score on AUD. So we're going to spend much of our time on those multiple choice questions and TBSs. The QIDs for these questions will be provided if you want to look them up in the UWorld database. Now, the most value will be obtained if you're able to attend and participate in person. That way you can test your knowledge and understanding and ask questions. Now, participants in the boot camp are likely to be at different stages of study and readiness for the exam. So the boot camp can be used in different ways. You can use it to get a heads up on material before you tackle it, or you can use it to review what you've learned and verify your understanding. Because the sessions are recorded, it will be possible to take a look later and review the material again, or review a session that you were unable to attend. Now we're going to work our way through major areas of the audit process with a focus on frequently tested areas and common problem areas. I use a polling box so you're able to answer questions that are posed. We're going to talk about key words in the question and in the answer choices. I check on your understanding of the terminology and concepts. If you get a question wrong, we want to figure out why. Was it because you didn't understand a word in the question? Was it because you read the question too quickly and missed a word? You know, the easiest way to miss a question is just because you didn't know that particular concept, because once the question is done, you'll have that concept down and be able to answer all of those questions in the future. We're going to be working both on your content knowledge and on your test-taking skills. So studying for AUD is a building process. You start with terminology and concepts and add how to audit to that foundation. Then you apply your knowledge to different fact scenarios that are presented. Now, AUD is different from the other sections because you typically aren't computing answers based on the facts provided. And AUD likes to test you on everything all the time. So students get so irritated when the question choices in a particular, multiple choice question or TBS that they're looking at include material that wasn't in that chapter. So you really are steadily building your knowledge as you work your way through the review, and you get better and better at answering the questions. Now remember, this is only a 4-hour workshop. We can't cover everything. But by focusing on frequently tested areas and common problem areas, you can be sure that you're looking at content that will be that is likely to be in the exam. So here's a sample of what we'll be doing. Here's the audit process that's going to provide the foundation for this bootcamp review. The audit process begins with client acceptance, followed by planning, obtaining an understanding, assessing risk and selecting procedures to perform, performing the procedures, evaluating the evidence collected, and finally preparing and issuing the report. Ethical requirements address the entire audit process. Next slide, please. A major step in the audit process is to gain an understanding of the client, including its internal control. The auditor is required to obtain an understanding of the client, its environment, and its internal control in order to identify where material misstatements in the financial statements might occur. So this includes the client's business model, operations, ownership, whether it's subject to SOX requirements. It includes the environment that the client operates in, the industry, whether it's regulated, the presence of technology, and the speed at which changes occur in that environment. It includes the client's internal control, focusing primarily on internal controls over financial reporting. This is a lot. So here's a question for you. For effective internal control, the accounts payable department generally should A, stamp, perforate, or otherwise cancel supporting documentation after payment is mailed. B, ascertain that each requisition is approved as to price, quantity, and quality by an authorized employee. C, obliterate the quantity ordered on the receiving department copy of the purchase order. D, establish the agreement of the vendor's invoice with the receiving report and the purchase order. Which answer do you think is the best answer? Remember that in the multiple choice question, more than one answer can sound correct. You are looking for the best answer. So how many of you think A is the best answer? Or B? C? D? Next slide, please. The best answer is D, matching the vendor invoice with the receiving report and the purchase order. So why is D the best answer? Let's take a look at the accounts payable process. Accounts payable receives the purchase order, receiving report, and vendor invoice, matches those documents, and then issues a payment voucher. A different department, Treasury, is responsible for issuing the check, while yet another department, General Accounting, records the payment. One thing to point out here, notice that this question explanation has a lot of information. Now, Suzanne just noted that this is indeed the UWorld way. You're provided with detailed information about the AP process as well as needed internal controls, not just the answer to the question. By the time you've finished this question and gone through the explanation, you will have reviewed the disbursement transaction cycle, both the processing steps and the internal controls present. You have refreshed or expanded your knowledge, and you're now better equipped to successfully tackle future questions in this or related areas. So now we can go back to the question and determine why the other answers were not as good. So A, by marking the supporting documents, marking the supporting documents so that they can't be reused is important. It is performed, however, by Treasury and not by accounts payable. B, making sure that the purchase requisition is properly approved is also important, but it would be performed by the purchasing department. C, obliterating the quantity ordered on the receiving department copy of the purchase order is actually sort of nonsensical. A blind copy of the purchase order, one that omits the quantity ordered, is usually created automatically when the purchase order is prepared. It doesn't require a person to cross out the numbers. So that leaves D, matching the documents, as the best answer. This is a frequently tested area. The examiners love internal controls. It is also a common problem area. The problem occurs because your understanding of AP may be based on what you have seen or experienced at work. The business world envisioned by examiners differs greatly from what you are likely to have encountered. The CPA exam business world is a world filled with large corporations with many different departments and the ability to segregate duties across those departments. Once you know that, you can successfully tackle a question like this to get to the best answer. Another thing to note, going through the wrong answers and understanding why each answer is wrong is a critical part of the study process. If you do this, you will be able to answer any question on this topic in the future. If instead you memorize the correct answer, you will only be able to answer correctly if you get this exact question, which is unlikely. Next slide, please. Let's try one more on audit reports. At the end of the audit, the auditor evaluates the work done and the evidence collected and decides on the report to be issued, including the opinion and any other paragraphs to be added. Next slide. An auditor was unable to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence concerning certain transactions due to an inadequacy in the entity's accounting records. The auditor would choose between issuing A, a qualified opinion and an unmodified opinion with an other matter paragraph, B, an unmodified opinion with an other matter paragraph and an adverse opinion, C, an adverse opinion and a disclaimer of opinion, and D, a disclaimer of opinion and a qualified opinion. Which answer do you think is the best answer? Next slide, please. The key thing to recognize is what kind of problem is it when the auditor is unable to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence? Audit opinions are affected by gap departures and scope limitations. The type of problem affects the opinions that are then rendered. For scope limitations, the opinion choices are qualified or disclaimer. There is no need for an other matter paragraph, and an adverse opinion is used only for gap departure. Next slide, please. The best answer is D. Why? Because the issue raised is a scope limitation, the inability to obtain evidence considered necessary. Now that you know about the opinion choices for gap departure and for scope limitation, you can easily answer questions like this one. The reporting questions aren't difficult. Review of the basic requirements and practice should be sufficient here to enable you to successfully answer these questions. So wrapping up, how do you pass audit? Review and practice. Passing audit requires understanding how an audit is conducted. Get the basics down and then build on that foundation. And along the way, perfect your test-taking skills. I look forward to seeing you in the boot camp.
Thanks. We're saving the best for last today, right? So we're moving on to FAR, and I know that Pete wishes that he could be here, but today I guess you get backup Pete. So I'm Dr. Megan Burke. I'm at Texas Women's University. And we're happy to talk to you today about the FAR boot camps, right? So again, like the other sessions, the other boot camps, we'll have 2 sessions. We're going to do multiple choice questions and TBSs, right? We're always going to start with our multiple choice questions before moving on to those task-based simulations, right? The MCQs allow us this opportunity to really dig into one particular issue and learn how to do that piece. And then we get to the TBS, which can take like 5 different multiple choice questions and cram them all together, right? So on the MCQ, we focus on let's learn this piece of it and make sure that we're really understanding that before we get to the TBS where we put them all together, right? So when we set up our boot camps, we'll typically pull multiple choice questions that are going to go through those pieces that we're going to need for the TBS. So we'll sort of build up to the TBS with the multiple choice questions that we have selected, right? So again, working on those MCQs just to make sure we really have that understanding before we move on to the TBS and sort of get overwhelmed just by the volume of information that's there. Now, note that on the boot camps, that when we look at these multiple choice questions, right, Dr. Yamamura there was saying that, the audit piece is not super math intensive. FAR is definitely more math intensive, right? We're going to see a lot more calculation based problems. So the boot camps are really going to focus on the math intensive type problems, right? We obviously, in the Q bank, in the question bank, and in all of the other explanations and the content that we provide, cover information for you to be able to learn how to do those theoretical, definitional, remembering and understanding type questions. But given that we only have 4 hours in boot camps, right, we want to make sure that we're really hitting those high need items. So we don't want to waste any of your time in those 4 hours, right? So all of the remembering and understanding and definitional terminology type stuff covered within the product, but not in the boot camp, right? So expect to sort of jump right into those harder things, right? So For example, if we're talking about, the statement of cash flows, there might be a definitional or remembering and understanding type question that is, a question like which one of these, cash flows would be in the operating section, right? And then a multiple choice question that's moving up into application would maybe say, calculate the cash from operations or the cash from investing in this one question. And then we get to a TBS that's going to ask you to pull all of that together, right? And say, what is the change in cash, and present that entire statement of cash flows, right? Can you do start to finish? Now, know that the boot camps are there to provide some extra, additional resources there, right? We're trying to hit on some test taking tips, right? We're hitting the, most testable areas, the places students have problems. It is not sufficient for you to pass the exam, right? You can't just go to 4 hours of boot camp and expect to then pass the exam, right? So it's not sufficient, it is in addition. As has been said, earlier today, you can do the boot camp sort of in whatever order you want. You can do the boot camp first to get sort of a sneak preview of what to expect or what to really look out for when you dig in and do your self-study, or you can do your self-study first and then come to the boot camp and use it as really a refresher. Do I remember how to do this, right? So when Pete presents a boot camp, he doesn't go into that assuming that you knew the information, right? He doesn't say, oh, you should have already known this. If you knew that, you wouldn't be there at the boot camp, trying to get that insight. So know that you can do it in whatever order you wish, but that the information is going to be provided there, right, to help you on those highly testable areas, right? Again, the question ID numbers are provided so that you can go back and see and rework those problems if you'd like. All right, so what are we doing in each of these? Again, multiple choice questions first, followed by the TBSs. So boot camp 1, really looking at the early content in the FAR section, again, organized by blueprints. So our consolidated financial statements, our statement of cash flows, EPS, receivables, and inventory. And then in session 2, moving on to the liability section of the balance sheet, right? So we were starting on the asset section over there. Then session 2 moves on to the liabilities there. Accounts payable, we do pick up some more of those assets then, jumping back over PP&E investments, our note payable, everybody's favorite, right? Accounting for income taxes, and lease accounting from the lessee side, lessor accounting having moved to bar. All right, so let's look at a problem here, right? So again, sort of test taking strategies are going to be included. So when we get a question like this, we might be overwhelmed, right? There's a lot of information. We sort of have a wall of text here. So we like to start at the end, make sure we understand what we're being asked to do, and then work our way back from the top. So we start at the bottom in its November 30th, year 1 consolidated balance sheet. What would we report as goodwill? So here we would say, let's stop and write down our formula for goodwill. What is that? That's going to be our purchase price. And we'll have a reminder here that that means cash that we're paying, but it could be in debt or stock or some sort of other assets, right? So we're talking about what goes into that purchase price, right? So again, cash and all of those non-cash pieces. We're then going to write down the next part of this formula, right? Which says maybe we didn't purchase 100% of this company, of Parlor. So we would need the fair value of our non-controlling interest, right? So we would write that down as our next piece and say that in total is the fair value of Parlor, right, of 100%. Now, in this particular question, the non-controlling interest doesn't apply. We don't have that in this problem. So why do we talk about that here? Well, we want to make sure that you understand the entire formula, and we'll see when we get to the TBS that matters, right? So we want to make sure that you aren't able to answer just this question, but that you could answer any question that's asking you about calculating goodwill, right? So we're going to have that fair value of the total firm, and then we want to subtract out the fair market value of our identifiable equity. So we'll have a talk or a conversation about what does that mean, right? What is this idea of identifiable equity? Well, that's identifiable assets minus our identifiable liabilities. We'll walk through that, right? What are those identifiable assets? Well, the things that are on the balance sheet plus anything that's not on the balance sheet, right? Perhaps we have maybe some in-process R&D that's not getting picked up. We'll talk about our identifiable liabilities. We have our liabilities that are on the books, but perhaps in a problem, we're given some notes that tell us that, maybe we have some sort of, lawsuit or something that hasn't actually made its way to being recognized and getting on the balance sheet, right? So we'll have our assets, identifiable assets, less those identifiable liabilities. And again, we call that our identifiable equity. So we have fair value of the total company that we're talking about purchasing, less the fair value of those identifiable or of that identifiable equity, giving us goodwill, right? And so we've written down that formula and we've talked about all of those other pieces. So now we can go back and read through this problem and hopefully the information isn't quite so overwhelming, right? We can pull out the pieces that we need. So here we've purchased for cash at $15 per share, all 250,000 shares of the outstanding common stock of Shaw. So here we have $15 per share times 250,000 shares. So we would have our purchase price and we can see that we've purchased all of the shares. So that means there's no non-controlling interest here. So we wrote it down, but now we can just write an NA or a 0 and move on. We go to our next sentence. At November 30th, Shaw's balance sheet showed a carrying amount of net assets of $3 million. So here we're being told we have a carrying value or a carrying amount, and we saw in our formula that we needed the fair value. So we know that maybe that's useful information, but it's not quite what we need. So we can continue reading and see what needs to happen. So at that date, the fair value of Shaw's PP&E exceeded the carrying amount by 400. Well, so now we know that we need to add that in, right? We have the carrying value, but the fair value is 400 higher. So we'll add that in. And then we have a fair value of their trademark name brand at 75. So we're going to add that in as well to get to that fair market value or the fair value. And then we have that in its November 30th year one consolidated balance sheet. What do we want to report as goodwill, right? So we were already told this was net assets, right? So assets minus those liabilities. And then we're adding in to get back up to fair value. So we have our purchase price. We had nothing or a 0 or an NA for non-controlling interest to get that fair value of the total company, less the fair market value of the identifiable equity. In this case, we're doing that in the form of net assets, right? Remembering that net assets and equity are similar concepts there. And that's going to give us the value of goodwill. Right? And this math is going to work out to $275,000, right? Just that purchase price, 15 times 250 minus the $3,475,000. So we have our answer there. And again, we're going to have our UWorld explanation. Again, with a beautiful image to start, right, to get you very quickly to what the right answer is. So you should be able to answer that from the image or at least get pointed in the right direction. We then have a very brief discussion about what's going on here, again, so you can answer other questions. You're not going to get this exact question on the exam. So brief overview of the how and the why we do it this way, right? And then we talk about the right answer, right? Why is this the right answer and how do we get to that $275,000? We then talk about the wrong answers, the incorrects. Why are they incorrect and how did you make that mistake? We do a lot of learning by getting it wrong, and this is a great place to do it, right? If you're going to get it wrong, we want it to be while you're studying. And you're going to learn from that and then not make that same mistake on the exam. So let's talk about how you got to those incorrect answers and what mistake you made and how we could do it better next time. And then, of course, our things to remember very briefly. If you wanted to take away the most important piece of information, what would that look like? Our link back to the references, and again, our representative task to show you that we're tying directly back to the blueprint, right? So our beautiful UWorld explanations. It's very, very important that when you're doing your test taking or your prep here, that you answer the questions, but then you go back and you read these explanations, right? Perhaps you got it right because you guessed and you were a good guesser. So it's really important that you go back and you really understand what happened and why, and that there's a lot of learning that can be done here. All right, so what are we going to do? We're putting all of this together to build up to those TBSs, those task-based simulations. Now, TBSs can really feel overwhelming, right? Like drinking from a fire hose. There's so much information getting presented to us, right? So here we're going to see this TBS, and it says that we have some unconsolidated financial statements of PO Corp, and it's 90% owned subsidiary Shaw. So we've conveniently named PO, P for parent, right? And Shaw, S like subsidiary. And then we see that we have a whole bunch of information, right? And what we really want to do is sort of skip over that and go right to the end, right? Spoiler alert, we want to go and see the question and know what we're being asked to do before we start trying to process all of this information, right? So we're going to just skip over this wall of information and we're going to go to the next page and see our question, right? And this says, calculate the amounts that will appear on our consolidated financial statements at the end of the year. Enter these as positive whole numbers, and if a balance is 0, enter 0. Do not leave this blank. So when you do this in UWorld, we obviously try and have all of those instructions there. It's very important to read those and make sure that you're going with exactly the format you're being asked to do, right? Here we're telling you positive whole numbers. If it's 0, make sure you enter that 0. You don't want to get a question wrong or partially wrong just because you left it blank and you should have had a 0, right? So do make sure that you're reading through all of that, right? But legalized cheating, I've gone to the end and I've said, what is being asked of me? And now I can see some of the information I'm going to be asked to provide. So before I get myself overwhelmed with going back to that, page of text and saying, what do I do with all of this? I'm going to start writing down my formulas so that I can very quickly pick out the information I need, and I can also quickly identify things that are superfluous, right? That extra information that's just there to, trick me, right? So I'm going to start with cash. Well, I'm probably going to need to, go back and do some math there, but goodwill, right? We just talked about goodwill. So in the boot camp, we would have had an MCQ, as you just saw, on goodwill. So right now I can very quickly write down my formula, right? I needed to do goodwill. That meant I needed my purchase price, cash plus non-cash, plus the fair value of any non-controlling interest. And here we saw that this question said, we owned 90%. So we are going to have that non-controlling interest. And that's why when we're teaching the MCQ for goodwill, we talk about all of those parts, even if they're not here, right? We didn't have a non-controlling interest, but now we need it for the TBS, right? And it's already in our mind, right? Add in the fair value of that non-controlling interest, giving us the total fair value, less the fair market value of that identifiable equity, getting me to goodwill. But we just did that, and I can quickly write down that formula. So again, when I go back and walk my way through all of the information provided, I can quickly pick out the pieces that I need. My next line is equipment. I'm probably going to have to do some math and add things together. Right? So we have an exhibit here, right, where we can see the information. I would need to add items together to get equipment. If we go back one slide, sorry, I hate to make you go in reverse, Matt. We have common stock. So also as part of the boot camp, we would have done a multiple choice question on consolidations, right? We're doing consolidated financial statements here. So we also would have had a multiple choice question on how to handle consolidations. And as part of that, right, we would have seen that we're going to get rid of the common stock from the subsidiary, right? That would have been part of our eliminating entries. And we would know that common stock just needs to be the parent's amount, right? So I know that that's going to be an easy one to come up with. The investment in Shaw, again, we would have had a consolidation question in the multiple choice questions, and we would have seen that we would have eliminated the investment in Shaw. So I know that that one's 0. We have dividends. Again, in that consolidation multiple choice question, we would see that we want the parent's dividends, right? And that's what matters there. So that one's going to be the parent. Again, sort of easy to come up with. Bonds payable is probably going to involve some math for me. And then non-controlling interest. As part of this consolidation and goodwill question, we would have gotten to how to calculate non-controlling interest, right? Dealing with the minority income and the minority dividends. So right off the bat, I know that common stock, the investment in Shaw, and dividends are going to be 0 or really straightforward and easy for me to get without any math, right? So I could have solved those without reading any of that extra text and without having to do a lot of math from that exhibit that we saw, that we, briefly had a little sneak peek of. But what have we done there? We've come up with 3 parts of the 8 that I can really easily and comfortably answer without having to do a lot of math. And I can go like, yes, I'm feeling good. I'm on a high. I know where I'm going. I'm feeling confident. And I can use that to carry into the rest of those, right? And what else do I know? Equipment, or goodwill. I have an equation written down to solve for goodwill. Non-controlling interest, right? I would have written down my equation and I would have had that ready to go and roll into all of that information, right? Again, to reduce the flow from the fire hydrant, to be able to quickly pick out the parts I need and to go into this with confidence, right? So again, on the next slide, right, we have that exhibit and we can see that there's a lot of information there, right? So again, we have made this a lot easier for ourselves going in and without feeling overwhelmed, right? So next slide for us here. Right, again, what we're trying to do is talk about the most tested pieces, right? The highly testable, the challenging parts, and set you up for success. Again, not sufficient to get you past the exam. The boot camps are really there as a supplement, right? And we look forward to seeing you at the next boot camp, and you'll get Pete for real. Sometimes I'm there hanging out, answering questions for him. He needs an extra set of hands answering those questions. So sometimes you get me in the background, but Pete or I will be happy to see you at any and all of our boot camps.
Thank you so much, Megan, Suzanne, and Jeannie. Really appreciate it. And yeah, this is part of a bigger program. I'm going to go through real quick a little bit more about the UWorld CPA exam review program. And at the end of this, stick around for an exclusive promotional code that we're going to provide for those who are here present today. Real quick, a glance at the amazing, stacked, stellar team of instructors and content developers. Those that you heard from today are part of this amazing team, and you can see that we have many more along with them, including Peter Olinto, Roger Phillip. We have just amazing people that are working in the universities. They are working in the field, and they bring a wealth of knowledge to ensure your success. They are writing the content, but also in front of the screen, some both. We have a little bit of mix of both here. And what that looks like in our self-study course, the recorded videos are all there, very organized. Everything, again, aligns with the AICPA blueprints. The way it's presented is similar to what you see here. It's actually exactly how you see here. And you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen is the ebook so that you can follow along with the lecturer as they're walking you through the content, and everything is very easy to identify. The representative tasks are right there in the ebook as well as in the video. Working together, very streamlined learning experience, and that then again roots back to the AICPA blueprints. Everything that we do roots here. So this is what the blueprint looks like, and you'll see these key areas that we have highlighted within the blueprints, identifying the content group and the topic that you're getting tested on, the skill level, and then the representative task that you are actually required to demonstrate that you know how to perform. And that's what we're walking you through to make sure that you can do. And how that now aligns to the UWorld CPA review course, you'll see here laid out in the content. Again, very easily identifiable within the program to make sure that you understand exactly what you're doing and why you're doing that within the entire program. We did a quick overview of all the questions, so I'm going to keep this part really, really brief. But the UWorld difference, we ensure that you are seeing questions that mirror what you will see on the CPA exam, and then provide you with those UWorld level answer explanations. And we looked a little bit at what the anatomy of those look like, so I won't harp on those, but all of them include illustrations to break down and make it really easy to take in that content quickly. Some of us are visual learners, some of us learn better by reading, so we hit all those different learning types in this entire program. And then again, the things to remember and the easy reference back to the blueprints and to the program, where this is all in the program, those links. If you haven't heard about SmartPath predictive technology, this is based, it's a data-driven platform that is rooted in data provided by previous successful students. So we have within every topic level targets, and your job in the course is to hit these targets. We have one for the score, so that's your performance, how well you're performing on the actual content, and question attempts. We want to make sure that you see and are exposed to a number of questions that align with the same number of questions that other successful candidates have exposed themselves to and ensured that they've shown that they have passed. So we are trying to aim towards hitting both of those targets for all of the topics, and you'll see this guidance along the way. Great, you met your targets, you get the green check mark. Need a little bit of improvement, you're going to see the yellow here. Needs a little bit more improvement, you're going to get the red. So you can kind of always know where you are and gauge when you are exam ready. We also provide many purposeful study tools within the program. It's very interactive. Some tools work better for others. You have that at your disposal to see what works best for you. So the notebook, for example, my notebook, it provides a really easy way to organize your notes, organize your thoughts, but then also copy and paste directly from the content in the course. So let's say you see an image in an answer explanation and you say, that really sums it up so nicely for me. You can easily copy and paste it into your notebook. You can also copy and paste some of the text within there, or you can provide your own text in there if that's more helpful for you, but that you can use that notebook. Also, similarly, you can create flashcards. So if you like that image and you want it on a flashcard because that's helpful for you, you can utilize that tool as well. And the decks are very easy to organize, and we provide something called well, basically what you are able to do is you can gauge when you answer it correct and you incorrect, and you can see the questions or the flashcards that you need more exposure to more readily and more available to you. Last but not least, if you don't know where you are and you don't know where you're going, you're lost. So we provide a study planner that gives you a guide, and it is based off of you and your schedule, your availability, the times a day that you are available to study. Each day you can click, I can do Sundays, I can't do Mondays, whatever works best for you. How many hours can you study those days? And then you're provided with a full guide that maps out everything that you need to do on those specific days, what videos you need to watch, what content you need to review, so that you can stay on path and meet your goals, because that's ultimately our goal for you. So all of this is incorporated in our full packages. Right here, you'll see our most popular package, which is our 2024 Elite Unlimited CPA Review Package, which is where you will also have access to the live boot camps that we focused on today. We also have access to all those tools that I mentioned. One special feature that I didn't go through, but when we do the flashcards, you have the opportunity to make your own. But when you are with the Elite Unlimited course, you also have access to Ready decks, which have content already. They're already populated with content that comes from our amazing team. And then, of course, unlimited access, a limited course access. So basically, you have access until you pass the exam for as long as you need it. So special for those of you that are here with us today, we do have a discount available, $20.99, CPA Sneak Peek. This code right here is good through September 13th. That's just a couple days. So please, 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 if you're interested in joining, there is no harm in taking advantage of this now, because even if you're not ready to start studying right away, this unlimited course access gives you the opportunity to take the time that you need and get a price that is very nice for you. And then also remember that schedule we had mentioned. Take a look at it of the live boot camps. So if you do want to make sure that you're enrolled for the course that you want access to, that you take advantage of that as soon as possible. And with that, I am going to ask my colleague Julie Snow if there were any questions that came along that we should address today.
We did have a lot of questions. Thank you, everyone behind the scenes, answering as many of them as I could, but there's a few that I need to surface to the team. So the first one, well, actually I can answer this first one, but I wanted to be sure we provided the answer to everyone. How can I enroll in the boot camps? The answer is that the live boot camps are a feature included in the UWorld CPA Elite Unlimited package, which is what's currently on screen. Actually, Madeline, if you wouldn't mind going back to that last slide.
So what I was going to do is show that screen that we have where you can actually access it, if that's helpful.
Great. So once you have purchased this particular, once you have purchased the Elite Unlimited course package, you log into your course and you can see this little pointer finger is showing you where you choose the events tab, and you can see the full list of classes, both the ones that are coming up and they are offered quarterly, as well as the ones that have already occurred, and you can watch the recordings from those sessions. Really, the goal of today's presentation was to give you a small sample of what to expect in the boot camps. We are looking to earn your trust, and so that you'll choose UWorld to help you pass the exam by choosing our most popular package, the CPA Elite Unlimited. Okay, next question. I'm going to surface this to any one of the instructors. And Matt, if you wouldn't mind going back to the slide with that shows the course. I think that's the one with the QR code. I want to keep that one on display just so that if you decide to go ahead and purchase, this is a limited time offer, so be sure to grab that QR code. So the question is, what is the difference between Boot Camp 1 and Boot Camp 2? Do I have any volunteers to answer that question?
I can speak for Reg.
Yeah, that's
if you'd
great.
like. Okay, so Reg, I think we do treat it a little differently than maybe we might hear for far odds. So I'll just speak for Reg only. But how Greg and I have approached it is that we always try to do an overview. All right, Boot Camp 1 is an overview of the various chapters. And then our Boot Camp 2 is where we do a deep dive. So we'll pick a topic. So if you go back to quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3, we have archived recordings, videos of when we did those boot camp 2s, and those were deep dives into particular topics. For this quarter 4, the deep dive that we're going into is looking at our professional responsibilities, our chapters 1 through 4 through our material, which is part of the AICPA blueprint. So we do an overview in boot camp 1, and then we do a deep dive in boot camp 2. That's for Reg.
Great. Jeannie, is it the same in Reg as well?
Oh, sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button. Odd is a little bit different in that because you're, the 2 boot camps are indeed different and cover different material, but they combine together because I'm doing the audit process And so half of the audit process is in the first one and half of the audit process is in the second one. So it's not exactly the same as overview and then deep dive. What it is a steady build through the 2 boot camps.
Okay.
And then for FAR, it's different topics in each boot camp, starting with MCQs, working our way up to the TBSs, the task-based simulation. So boot camp 1 and boot camp 2, we have the list of chapters there, how we split.
Thank you. Another question, would we have to review certain material before taking these boot camps? How much review needs to be done ahead of attending the boot camps?
So far specific that we don't assume that you come in with any prior knowledge. Again, you could use it as your first stop and use that to sort of pick out the things you need to focus on when you go in to do your self-study, or you could have already reviewed and you could, you know, come in and use it just to, you know, test your own knowledge. So no prior knowledge necessary, but it's okay if you've already studied that. You won't be, you know, bored out of your mind for FAR.
I think it's the same for AUD and probably for Reg, because people are at different stages when they attend the boot camps. If you want to attend it before you start studying, that's fine. If you want to attend it while you've already started studying, that's fine. In either case, it means that you do not have to review specific material. But if there's an area that you're struggling with and you know the boot camp is going to cover that area, then I definitely would review it and then hit the boot camp.
Yeah, since we'll be doing an overview of the 12 tax chapters on that very first night, if it's something that Greg and I are discussing and that is not familiar to you at all, you're like, what's that? That's probably a good indication that you need to go back and review that material.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna take one more question because we're out of time, but one more. When should I join the boot camp? Before well, obviously before your exam date, but better to join early in the stage of reviewing or later in the stage or somewhere in the middle?
You know, for me, I think it depends on how your studies are going, because we're an extra resource. We can help you get over some, you know, we can help you tackle some difficult topics perhaps. And there's certainly no bar to joining early, but if you run into problems along the way, then joining in the middle is fine, and definitely taking a look at the end would be good, or by the end.
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong. I think, you know, if you did decide to join in the very beginning and you haven't looked at tax material in a really long time, like I said, the overview of the 12 chapters of tax is really going to kind of clue you in of what's coming and when you're going to go through those chapters. So if it's the beginning for you and you're studying and you're listening to our boot camps and you're like, yeah, I remember a lot of that material, that's good. You should have some confidence there. And if it doesn't sound familiar, well, you know what areas then you need to concentrate on.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you everyone for attending and for all of your questions. Any final words?
No,
Good luck. We want to see you. Yeah, we want to see you at the boot camps.
Boot camp. I appreciate you joining today, and please do reach out to us if you have any questions about this feature. A recording from today's webinar will be emailed out within 2 business days, so keep an eye on your inbox for that. And thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.